Summer changes everything. Step outside on a hot afternoon, and you'll feel the warmth rising from every container. Leaves look tired. Soil dries faster than expected. At first glance, it seems like growing vegetables in pots during summer is almost impossible. But the truth tells a very different story. The biggest problem isn't the heat. It's choosing crops that were never meant to handle it. Today we're counting down 15 vegetables that thrive in containers during summer heat, using practical growing knowledge and trusted gardening guidance. Stay with me until number 1, because that final leafy vegetable keeps producing long after ordinary spinach has already given up. That brings us to number 15, cherry tomatoes. Most people believe all tomatoes struggle once summer temperatures climb. After a few scorching afternoons, it's easy to assume every tomato plant will stop producing. If you've ever watched large tomatoes develop blossom drop or split after inconsistent watering, you've probably wondered if summer is simply the wrong season. But surprisingly, cherry tomatoes often tell a different story. That's because smaller fruits place less stress on the plant. Instead of putting all its energy into growing a few oversized tomatoes, the plant keeps producing clusters of smaller fruit, even during long stretches of warm weather. While no tomato enjoys extreme stress, many cherry varieties continue flowering and setting fruit more reliably than their larger relatives when they're cared for properly. For container gardeners, that difference can be surprisingly noticeable. A container that's at least 5 gallons gives the roots enough room to spread without becoming crowded. Fill it with a light, well-draining potting mix, then place it where it receives 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. Water deeply whenever the top inch of soil feels dry, instead of adding a little water every few hours. Deep watering encourages stronger roots that cope better with hot conditions. Interestingly, the container itself also plays an important role. Dark-colored pots absorb more heat throughout the afternoon. In cooler climates, that extra warmth can encourage faster growth. During intense summer heat, however, light-colored containers or fabric grow bags often help keep root temperatures more balanced, reducing unnecessary stress below the soil's surface. Research from several university extension gardening programs also points to one simple habit that many beginners overlook. Regular harvesting encourages the plant to keep producing new flowers instead of slowing down to finish ripening older fruit. In other words, the more often you pick ripe cherry tomatoes, the more likely the plant is to reward you with another round. Fresh from the vine, they're perfect for salads, pasta dishes, roasting, or simply eating right beside the garden. Their naturally sweet flavor often becomes one of the biggest rewards of growing them at home. Here's a fascinating fact before we move on. Botanically, tomatoes are fruits. Yet for cooking, they're treated as vegetables almost everywhere in the world. That unusual identity has sparked debates for generations, making the humble tomato one of the most interesting plants you can grow in a container. And speaking of vegetables that become even happier as the temperature rises, the next one might surprise you even more. Coming in at number 14 are bell peppers, also known as capsicums. Many gardeners think peppers suffer when summer becomes too hot. Once the afternoon sun feels intense and the patio starts radiating heat, it seems logical that tender fruits would struggle to develop. If you've ever seen a pepper plant pause its growth during a heat wave, you might assume the season has already peaked. However, that's only part of the story. Bell peppers originally evolved in warm climates, so they actually appreciate consistent summer warmth. The secret isn't avoiding heat altogether. It's preventing the roots from becoming stressed while allowing the plant to enjoy plenty of sunshine. When those two conditions stay balanced, peppers can spend their energy building thick, colorful fruits instead of simply trying to survive. That's where container choice becomes surprisingly important. A 5 to 7 gallon container gives the roots enough space without staying waterlogged after every watering. Use a rich, well-draining potting mix blended with compost and place the container somewhere it receives at least 6 hours of direct sunlight each day. During especially hot afternoons, keeping mulch on top of the soil helps slow moisture loss and keeps root temperatures more stable. Watering matters just as much. Instead of giving the plant a small drink every day, water deeply until moisture reaches the entire root system. Then allow the top layer of soil to dry slightly before watering again. That simple routine encourages stronger roots, making the plant much more resilient during long stretches of summer heat. Interestingly, patience also improves the harvest. Many people pick green peppers as soon as they're full size. Yet if you leave them on the plant a little longer, they'll gradually change into red, yellow, or orange depending on the variety. During that extra time, the fruits become sweeter, richer in flavor, and naturally higher in vitamin C. Extension gardening experts often recommend feeding container peppers with a balanced fertilizer once flowering begins. Too much nitrogen creates beautiful leaves but fewer peppers. A balanced feeding schedule helps the plant focus on producing fruit throughout the growing season instead. Here's a fascinating fact. Despite their mild taste, bell peppers belong to exactly the same species as many hot chili peppers. The biggest difference is one tiny genetic change that prevents bell peppers from producing capsaicin, the natural compound responsible for heat. Now that we've looked at a familiar summer favorite, the next plant grows so aggressively in containers that many gardeners spend more time controlling it than encouraging it. Number 13 belongs to one of the most misunderstood herbs you can grow: mint. Most people think mint is impossible to kill. Leave it alone, give it a little water, and it'll grow forever. While there's some truth to that idea, many container gardeners are surprised when their mint suddenly becomes leggy, loses its rich aroma, or starts producing smaller leaves during the hottest part of summer. The reason isn't the heat itself. Mint naturally enjoys warm weather, but it performs best when its roots stay cool and consistently moist. Unlike many vegetables that crave full-day sunshine, mint appreciates a little protection during the hottest afternoon hours. That small adjustment often makes the difference between a struggling plant and one that keeps producing fresh leaves for months. That's why containers are actually one of the best places to grow it. In the ground, mint spreads aggressively through underground runners, quickly taking over nearby garden beds. A container keeps those energetic roots under control, while giving you complete control over watering and soil quality. A 10 to 12-inch pot filled with loose, compost-rich potting mix provides plenty of room for healthy growth without letting the plant become invasive. Watering is where many beginners accidentally make a mistake. Instead of waiting until the soil becomes completely dry, check the top inch every morning during hot weather. If it feels dry, water deeply until excess moisture drains from the bottom. Adding a thin layer of organic mulch also helps reduce evaporation, keeping the roots cooler throughout the afternoon. Another simple habit leads to an even bigger harvest. Harvest the tips regularly, rather than removing only the largest leaves. Pinching off the growing ends encourages the plant to branch outward, creating a fuller, bushier container packed with fresh growth. Before long, you'll have more mint than you know what to do with. Fresh leaves can flavor iced tea, lemonade, fruit salads, yogurt sauces, desserts, and countless summer drinks. Just a few stems picked moments before serving release an aroma that's difficult to match with store-bought herbs. Here's something many people don't know. Mint has been cultivated for thousands of years, and ancient civilizations valued it so highly that it was used not only in cooking, but also to freshen homes and welcome honored guests. Its refreshing scent has remained popular across cultures ever since. As useful as mint is, the next vegetable offers something even more rewarding, because every harvest encourages another one to grow. Coming in at number 12 are garlic chives. At first glance, they don't seem like summer superstars. Their thin, grass-like leaves look too delicate to handle weeks of bright sunshine and rising temperatures. Many gardeners even confuse them with ordinary chives and expect them to fade once the weather turns hot. But surprisingly, garlic chives are built a little differently. Unlike many leafy vegetables that rush to bolt under summer heat, garlic chives continue producing fresh leaves for a remarkably long time. That's because they grow from a tough underground root system that quickly replaces harvested foliage. Instead of slowing down after each cut, the plant simply sends up another flush of new growth. That's excellent news if you're gardening in containers. A pot that's 8 to 10 inches deep gives garlic chives enough room to develop healthy roots. Choose a loose, well-draining potting mix enriched with compost. Then place the container where it receives at least 6 hours of sunlight each day. During extremely hot weeks, a little afternoon shade can help keep the leaves tender without reducing overall growth. Harvesting also works differently than many beginners expect. Rather than pulling individual leaves, use clean scissors to trim the entire clump about 2 inches above the soil. Within days, fresh green shoots begin appearing again. This simple cut and regrow habit allows one container to provide repeated harvests throughout much of the growing season. Another advantage often goes unnoticed. Late in summer, garlic chives produce clusters of small white flowers that attract bees, butterflies, and other helpful pollinators. Those visitors don't just benefit the chives, they also improve pollination for nearby vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, and beans growing on the same patio or balcony. Fresh garlic chives add a gentle garlic flavor without the strong bite of regular garlic cloves. Sprinkle them over scrambled eggs, baked potatoes, soups, stir-fries, or homemade salads for an easy burst of fresh flavor picked only minutes before dinner. Here's a fascinating fact. Although they're called garlic chives, they belong to the same plant family as onions, leeks, and garlic. That entire family has been cultivated by people for thousands of years, making it one of the oldest groups of edible plants still grown in home gardens today. We've only covered the first few vegetables, and already the list is getting more surprising. Up next is a plant that doesn't just give you one harvest, it rewards you with 2 completely different kinds of food from the very same container. At number 11, we have sweet potatoes. Most people grow sweet potatoes for one reason only. They wait patiently for months, hoping to dig up a basket full of underground tubers at the end of the season. If that's all you've ever expected, you're missing half the harvest. But surprisingly, this plant starts feeding you long before it's time to dig. The secret lies in its fast-growing vines. Throughout summer, sweet potatoes produce tender young leaves that are completely edible when cooked. In many parts of the world, those leafy greens are harvested regularly, while the underground roots continue growing. That means one container can provide fresh vegetables for dinner today, and a second harvest later in the season. That's one reason sweet potatoes are such an efficient choice for small space gardeners. A 15 to 20 gallon grow bag or large container gives the roots enough room to expand without becoming crowded. Fill it with loose, well-draining potting mix, and place it where the plant receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. Warm soil actually encourages healthy root development, making summer one of its favorite seasons. Watering takes a little balance. Keep the soil evenly moist while the plant is becoming established. Once the vines begin spreading across the container, the roots become much better at handling short, dry periods. Deep watering every few days is usually more effective than light daily watering, especially during long stretches of hot weather. Another detail surprises many beginners. Those long vines don't have to be treated as a problem. You can gently guide them around a balcony railing, let them spill over the edge of a patio container, or even train them upward with simple supports. Besides producing food, they create a lush green display that softens hard outdoor spaces. Extension gardening specialists often remind growers to avoid adding too much nitrogen fertilizer. Excess nitrogen encourages endless vine growth, but can reduce the size of the underground tubers you're hoping to harvest. A balanced fertilizer allows the plant to divide its energy more efficiently between leaves and roots. Here's a fascinating fact. Sweet potatoes aren't actually related to ordinary potatoes at all. Despite sharing a familiar name, they belong to completely different plant families and evolved along separate paths. Their similar appearance underground hides a surprisingly distant relationship. Now, if growing food beneath the soil sounds satisfying, the next plant spends nearly its entire life hidden underground before revealing the flavorful reward waiting inside the container. Coming in at number 10 is ginger. Most people think ginger belongs on a grocery store shelf, not in a container garden. Since the edible part grows underground, it's easy to believe you need a large backyard to produce a worthwhile harvest. That assumption keeps many gardeners from trying one of the most rewarding plants for warm weather. But the reality is far more interesting. Ginger is a tropical plant that naturally thrives in warmth. While many vegetables struggle through the hottest weeks of summer, ginger is quietly expanding beneath the soil. Every warm day gives its underground rhizomes a little more time to grow thicker, healthier, and more flavorful. That's exactly why containers work so well. A 12 to 15-inch wide pot with plenty of drainage holes gives the rhizomes room to spread without becoming crowded. Fill it with loose, compost-rich potting mix that holds moisture without staying soggy. Unlike tomatoes or peppers, ginger doesn't need blazing afternoon sun. A spot with morning sunlight and light afternoon shade often creates the perfect growing conditions. Watering follows a different rhythm too. The soil should stay evenly moist but never waterlogged. If it dries out completely, growth slows down. On the other hand, constantly soaked soil can cause the rhizomes to rot. Checking the moisture with your finger every few days is usually more reliable than watering on a fixed schedule. Patience becomes your biggest advantage. Unlike quick-growing greens, ginger develops gradually throughout the season. After about 4 to 5 months, you can gently uncover the edge of the container and harvest a few young rhizomes without disturbing the rest of the plant. Leaving the main clump in place allows it to continue growing for an even larger harvest later. Gardening experts often recommend planting fresh, healthy ginger pieces with visible buds, sometimes called eyes. Those small buds become the new shoots that eventually produce lush green stems above the soil, while the real harvest continues expanding below. Here's a fascinating fact. The spicy flavor of ginger comes from natural compounds called gingerols. These compounds help give fresh ginger its familiar warmth and distinctive aroma, making it one of the world's most widely used culinary spices for thousands of years. Ginger spends months quietly building its harvest beneath the surface. The next plant follows a similar strategy, but when it's finally ready, it reveals a brilliant golden treasure that's been prized across cultures for centuries. At number 9 we have turmeric. Most people recognize turmeric as a bright yellow powder sitting in the spice cabinet. Few stop to think that it begins as a living plant quietly growing beneath the soil. If you've never seen fresh turmeric before, you might assume it's difficult to grow at home. Surprisingly, summer is exactly when this plant comes alive. Turmeric is native to warm tropical regions, so long days of heat encourage steady growth instead of slowing it down. While many vegetables focus on producing flowers or fruit, turmeric spends the season building thick underground rhizomes. That's where all the flavor, color, and aroma slowly develop. Container gardening makes the process much easier to manage. Choose a pot that's at least 12 to 15 inches wide and deep, giving the rhizomes plenty of room to spread. Fill it with loose, fertile potting mix enriched with compost. Then place the container where it receives bright morning sunlight and light afternoon shade. Too much harsh afternoon sun can dry the soil quickly, while gentle filtered light keeps the plant growing comfortably. Watering is simple once you understand its rhythm. Keep the soil evenly moist throughout the growing season, but don't let it stay soggy. Good drainage is essential because standing water can damage the underground rhizomes. Adding a layer of mulch helps lock in moisture and keeps the root zone cooler during long stretches of hot weather. One detail often surprises first-time growers. Unlike leafy vegetables that reward you within weeks, turmeric asks for patience. The green stems above the soil may look quiet for months, but underneath, the rhizomes are gradually becoming larger and richer in color. When the leaves finally begin turning yellow toward the end of the season, it's usually a sign that harvest time is approaching. Gardening specialists often recommend saving a few healthy rhizomes from your harvest, instead of using every piece in the kitchen. Those saved sections can be replanted the following season, allowing one successful crop to become the beginning of many more. Here's a fascinating fact. Fresh turmeric has a much milder, earthier flavor than the dried powder sold in stores. It also contains the natural pigment curcumin, which gives turmeric its famous golden color, and has made it an important culinary ingredient across many cultures for centuries. So far, every plant on this list has handled summer in its own way. The next one produces delicate fruits wrapped inside a paper-like lantern, making it one of the most unusual vegetables, or rather fruits, you can grow in a container. Coming in at number 8 is the Armenian cucumber. Most people think cucumbers in extreme summer heat don't get along. After a few scorching days, it's common to see vines wilt, flowers drop, or fruits turn bitter. That leads many gardeners to believe cucumbers simply aren't worth growing in containers once summer reaches its peak. But surprisingly, the Armenian cucumber has a completely different reputation. Despite its name, it isn't a true cucumber at all. It's actually a type of muskmelon that grows long, slender fruits, with the crisp texture and refreshing taste people expect from a cucumber. That unique background also helps explain why it handles hot weather far better than many common cucumber varieties. For container gardeners, that's a huge advantage. Choose a 10 to 15 gallon container filled with rich, well-draining potting mix, and place it where the plant receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight each day. Since the vines grow quickly, adding a sturdy trellis from the beginning keeps the fruits hanging straight, improves airflow, and saves valuable patio or balcony space. Watering makes all the difference during summer. Instead of giving the plant small amounts every day, water deeply whenever the top inch of soil feels dry. Consistent moisture helps the fruit stay crisp and reduces the chances of developing a bitter taste. A layer of organic mulch also slows evaporation and keeps the roots cooler during long sunny afternoons. Harvest timing is another secret many beginners miss. Pick the fruits when they're about 12 to 18 inches long, while the skin is still smooth and tender. Waiting too long can make the flesh less crisp, while regular harvesting encourages the vine to keep producing fresh flowers and new fruit throughout the season. Gardening experts often recommend growing Armenian cucumbers vertically, instead of letting them spread across the ground. Better air circulation around the leaves can reduce common fungal problems and makes harvesting much easier. Here's a fascinating fact. Although it's called the Armenian cucumber, this plant is botanically much closer to a melon than a true cucumber. Its mild flavor and remarkable heat tolerance have made it a favorite in warm regions for generations. We've reached the second half of our countdown, and the next plant may look like an ordinary tomato at first glance. However, one unusual feature hidden beneath its papery husk makes it unlike anything else growing in a summer container garden. At number 7 we have the tomatillo. Most people see a tomatillo and assume it's simply an unripe tomato. The color is similar. The shape looks familiar. From a distance it's easy to think they're almost the same plant. That simple assumption causes many gardeners to overlook one of the toughest summer crops they could grow in containers. But the truth is, tomatillos play by their own rules. Although they're close relatives of tomatoes, tomatillos naturally handle warm weather with impressive confidence. Once summer settles in, the plants continue growing vigorously, producing fresh flowers that eventually become firm green fruits wrapped inside their signature paper-like husks. Those husks aren't just decorative, they're one of the plant's smartest survival features. Think of them as built-in protection. As each fruit develops, the husk expands around it like a lightweight cover. It helps shield the fruit from direct sunlight, keeps dust and insects away, and provides an extra layer of protection while the tomatillo ripens. By the time the husk becomes dry and starts splitting open, the fruit inside is usually ready to harvest. Container growing makes caring for tomatillos surprisingly simple. Choose a 7 to 10 gallon container with good drainage, and fill it with rich, well-draining potting mix. Place it where it receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight each day. Since tomatillo plants can become quite tall and full of fruit, adding a sturdy cage or stake early in the season keeps the stems supported before they become heavy. One detail catches many first-time growers by surprise. Unlike many vegetables that produce well on their own, tomatillos usually need more than one plant for reliable pollination. Growing 2 plants nearby allows bees and other pollinators to transfer pollen between flowers, leading to a much larger harvest throughout the summer. Extension gardening programs often recommend harvesting tomatillos as soon as the fruit completely fills the husk. Waiting too long can cause overripe fruit to fall naturally, while picking at the right stage delivers the bright, slightly tangy flavor that makes tomatillos so popular in homemade green salsa. Here's a fascinating fact. Tomatillos were being cultivated in Central America long before modern tomatoes became famous around the world. For centuries, they have been an essential ingredient in traditional Mexican cooking, proving that sometimes the less familiar crop has the longest history. We've officially reached the halfway point of our countdown. From here on, the vegetables become even tougher, and the next one isn't really a vegetable at all. It's a towering grass that absolutely loves the hottest days of summer. Number 6 belongs to a plant that's often overlooked in vegetable gardens: lemongrass. Most people grow lemongrass for its fresh citrus scent. It usually ends up in a corner of the patio as an herb for tea or soup, nothing more. Because it looks like an ordinary clump of grass, many gardeners assume it can't be one of the toughest summer container plants. But appearances can be deceiving. Lemongrass evolved in warm tropical climates, where intense sunshine and high temperatures are part of everyday life. Instead of slowing down when summer arrives, it often produces stronger, taller stalks, as long as it has enough moisture and space to grow. While many plants struggle through a heat wave, lemongrass simply keeps reaching upward. That's one reason it performs so well in containers. Choose a 12 to 16-inch pot with excellent drainage, and fill it with a fertile, well-draining potting mix. Place the container where it receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. The combination of warm soil and bright light encourages thick, healthy stalks that become more flavorful as the season progresses. Watering is surprisingly straightforward. Lemongrass prefers evenly moist soil, especially during periods of rapid summer growth. Water deeply whenever the top layer begins to dry, allowing excess water to drain away completely. Adding a layer of mulch helps the soil stay cooler and reduces moisture loss during long sunny afternoons. Harvesting is easier than many beginners expect. Instead of cutting the entire plant, simply pull or cut the thicker outer stalks near the base. The younger shoots in the center continue growing, which means one healthy container can provide fresh harvests again and again throughout the season. Beyond the kitchen, this plant offers another welcome benefit. Its tall, graceful leaves add height and movement to balconies, patios, and small gardens, creating a lush tropical look even in limited spaces. The fresh citrus fragrance, released when the leaves are brushed or trimmed, makes spending time around the container even more enjoyable. Here's a fascinating fact. Many people believe lemongrass naturally keeps mosquitoes away. While the plant contains aromatic oils that give it its famous citrus scent, simply growing it in a pot isn't enough to create a protective barrier. Those fragrant oils are most effective after they're extracted and used in specially formulated repellents. We've entered the top 5, where every plant becomes even more impressive. The next one is so misunderstood that countless gardeners pull it out as a weed, never realizing they're throwing away one of the toughest edible plants summer has to offer. We've reached the top 5, and number 5 might be the biggest surprise so far. Purslane, also known as kulfasag. Most gardeners don't plant purslane. They pull it out. It often appears between patio pavers, along garden paths, or inside neglected pots, so it's usually dismissed as nothing more than a stubborn weed. If you've removed it without a second thought, you're certainly not alone. But surprisingly, that weed is one of the toughest edible plants you can grow during summer. The secret is hidden inside its leaves. Unlike ordinary leafy greens, purslane has thick, succulent foliage that stores water. Those fleshy leaves act like tiny natural reservoirs, helping the plant stay hydrated when temperatures climb and the soil begins drying out. That's why purslane often remains lush and green, while more delicate vegetables start looking tired. For container gardeners, that's a remarkable advantage. A 10 to 12-inch container is usually enough because purslane has a shallow root system. Fill it with a well-draining potting mix and place it somewhere that receives at least 6 hours of sunlight every day. Once established, it asks for surprisingly little attention. Water thoroughly, then allow the top layer of soil to dry before watering again. Too much moisture is often a bigger problem than too little. Harvesting couldn't be much easier. Instead of pulling up the whole plant, trim the young stems with clean scissors, leaving the base untouched. Within a short time, fresh shoots begin growing again. This simple cut-and-come-again method allows one container to provide repeated harvests throughout much of the summer. The flavor also catches many first-time growers off guard. The leaves are crisp, juicy, and slightly tangy, making them a refreshing addition to salads. They can also be lightly cooked in soups, stir-fries, or mixed with other leafy vegetables for extra texture and freshness. Researchers have also found something unusual about purslane. Among leafy vegetables, it contains notably higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, nutrients that are more commonly associated with certain seeds and fish. While purslane shouldn't be viewed as a replacement for a balanced diet, it's one reason this humble plant has attracted growing interest from gardeners and nutrition researchers alike. Here's a fascinating fact before we continue. People have been eating purslane for thousands of years. Long before it was mistaken for a weed, it was intentionally grown and valued across parts of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East as a dependable summer food. If you thought that hidden survivor was impressive, the next plant climbs instead of spreads. And when summer heat arrives, it seems to grow faster with every passing day. Coming in at number 4 are Yardlong Beans. Most people expect bean plants to slow down once summer becomes hot. After all, many common beans produce best during mild weather, so it's easy to assume every variety behaves the same way. If you've stopped planting beans after spring, you may have been missing one of the best performers of the entire season. But Yardlong beans are different. Despite their name, they aren't simply extra long green beans. They were developed in tropical regions where long, hot summers are normal. Instead of struggling through high temperatures, these vigorous vines often grow faster as the weather becomes warmer, making them an excellent choice for container gardens. Their growing habit is one of the biggest advantages. Unlike bush beans that stay compact, Yardlong beans climb quickly. A 10 to 15 gallon container paired with a sturdy 6 to 8 foot trellis gives the vines plenty of room to grow upward instead of spreading across the ground. That vertical growth saves valuable space on balconies, patios, and small backyards while improving air circulation around the leaves. Watering consistently keeps the harvest coming. Give the plant a deep watering whenever the top inch of soil feels dry, especially during flowering and pod development. A layer of mulch helps hold moisture and keeps the roots cooler on scorching afternoons. Feeding with a balanced fertilizer every few weeks also supports steady production without encouraging excessive leafy growth. Harvest timing makes a noticeable difference. Pick the pods while they're still young, smooth, and tender. Waiting too long allows the seeds inside to mature, making the pods tougher and less flavorful. Regular harvesting also signals the plant to produce even more flowers, leading to a longer and more productive season. Here's a fascinating fact. Although they're called yardlong beans, most pods grow between 12 and 24 inches, not a full yard. Their name simply reflects how impressively long they can become compared to ordinary beans. One final surprise awaits. The next leafy plant has been feeding people for thousands of years, yet many modern gardeners have never considered growing it in a container, even though it thrives when summer heat sends lettuce running for cover. At number 3, we have Amaranth Greens, also known as chow lai sog. Most gardeners believe leafy greens and summer simply don't mix. Once temperatures rise, crops like lettuce and traditional spinach often bolt, turn bitter, or stop producing altogether. It seems like fresh greens have to wait until cooler weather returns. But amaranth completely changes that idea. This ancient plant was made for warm conditions. Instead of struggling through long sunny days, it continues producing fresh, tender leaves, while many other greens have already faded. That's exactly why it's become a favorite in regions with long, hot summers. Container growing makes it even easier. A 10 to 12-inch pot filled with fertile, well-draining potting mix gives amaranth everything it needs to thrive. Place the container where it receives at least 6 hours of sunlight, then water deeply whenever the top layer of soil begins to dry. Once established, the plant grows quickly and needs very little attention beyond regular watering. Harvesting early gives the best results. Pick the young outer leaves first, while allowing the center to keep growing. This simple method encourages fresh new growth and lets you enjoy multiple harvests from the same container throughout the season. The tender leaves can be added to soups, stir-fries, curries, or lightly steamed as a nutritious side dish. There's another reason this plant deserves its place near the top of the list. Amaranth isn't valued only for its leaves. Many varieties also produce tiny, protein-rich seeds that have been harvested for food for centuries. One plant can provide both nutritious greens and a valuable grain, making it an incredibly productive choice for gardeners with limited space. Here's a fascinating fact. Long before modern agriculture, amaranth was one of the most important food crops grown by ancient civilizations in Central and South America. Its remarkable ability to handle heat is one reason it continues to be grown around the world today. Only one vegetable remains, and it proves that not every spinach disappears when summer arrives. In fact, this final plant seems to welcome the hottest days of the year. Our runner-up is Malabar spinach. Most people assume spinach simply can't survive summer. As temperatures rise, traditional spinach quickly bolts, the leaves become bitter, and the harvest comes to an end. Many gardeners accept that as unavoidable. But that's only true for ordinary spinach. Malabar spinach isn't actually a true spinach at all. It's a fast-growing tropical vine that loves warm, humid weather. While common spinach fades away, Malabar spinach continues climbing, producing thick, glossy leaves throughout the hottest weeks of summer. That makes it perfect for containers. A 12 to 15-inch pot with a small trellis gives the vines plenty of room to grow upward instead of spreading across the ground. Fill the container with fertile, well-draining potting mix, keep the soil consistently moist, and place it where it receives 6 to 8 hours of sunlight each day. The warmer the season becomes, the happier this plant often looks. Harvesting is simple. Pick the young leaves and tender vine tips regularly, instead of waiting for the plant to become overgrown. Frequent harvesting encourages fresh shoots, allowing one container to provide continuous greens for much of the summer. Here's an interesting fact. The leaves have a slightly thicker texture than regular spinach, making them excellent for soups, stir-fries, and curries. They're also rich in vitamins and stay tender even during weather that causes many leafy vegetables to give up. We've reached the final spot, and number 1 is a plant that surprises even experienced gardeners. It looks familiar at first, yet it thrives during summer in a way that ordinary spinach never could. Finally, we've reached number 1, New Zealand spinach. Most gardeners believe every type of spinach disappears once real summer heat arrives. After watching traditional spinach bolt year after year, it's easy to think fresh leafy greens are simply impossible until cooler weather returns. But this remarkable plant completely changes that story. Despite its name, New Zealand spinach isn't a true spinach. It's a different species that naturally thrives in warm coastal climates. Instead of struggling through long sunny days, it continues producing fresh, tender leaves when many other greens have already stopped growing. That's exactly why experienced container gardeners often rely on it for dependable summer harvests. Growing it in a container is surprisingly straightforward. Choose a 12 to 15-inch pot with good drainage and fill it with a rich, well-draining potting mix. Place the container where it receives 6 to 8 hours of sunlight each day. Water deeply whenever the top inch of soil feels dry, and add a light layer of mulch to help the soil stay cool during the hottest afternoons. One simple habit makes an enormous difference. Harvest the young shoots regularly, instead of waiting for large, mature leaves. Every harvest encourages the plant to produce fresh growth, allowing a single container to provide leafy greens for weeks, even months, throughout the hottest part of the season. New Zealand spinach became popular with sailors centuries ago because it could provide fresh greens during long sea voyages. Today, that same resilience makes it one of the most dependable leafy vegetables for hot weather container gardens. And that's the biggest lesson from this countdown. Summer heat isn't always the enemy. More often, success comes down to growing plants that were naturally designed to thrive in it. Now it's your turn. Which of these 15 summer container vegetables surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe for more practical container gardening guides. Until next time, keep growing, keep experimenting, and let your small space produce more than you ever imagined.